Welcome back to the Wild Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Finning, and today we have another one of my special teachers here with me, Linda Oschins. She is another founder of Yoga on High. We interviewed one of her co-founders, Marcia Miller, a couple weeks ago, and we're going to dive into pranayama, as she's going to explain what that is, how it can be used. But I did a 9-month training with her, among other trainings, and she really opened my world into how to use the breath to all kinds of things. And she'll be better at explaining it than I am. So welcome to the show, Linda.
Thank you.
So I always like to share people's background stories on how they got into yoga as a therapy. In your case, really becoming ingrained in learning the practices of pranayama. Do you want to share maybe a little background with the audience?
About 42 years ago, I began meditating with the the Insight Meditation Group in Columbus, Ohio. And then about 35 years ago, I began practicing yoga seriously. In response to a life-threatening illness that required a surgery, and I lost mobility because of it, I called up Marcia Miller, the woman you interviewed the other day, and said, I can't move my arm. Will yoga help? And she said, just come to class. I came to class and never stopped coming to class. And we eventually, after years of studying with her, we ended up opening Yoga on High together, along with Martha Markham. During that time, or somewhere along the way, I realized that I was not establishing a coherent, meaningful pranayama practice. If you go back so far, as far ago as 35 years ago, and you know, over a lot of the course of history as yoga was taught in the United States over that period of time, it was very easy to get asana training. This is training on the physical postures of yoga. And this is true even today, but much more difficult to get pranayama training, or pranayama training that was complex. And I lived in Columbus, Ohio. There was not a guru or master in my area. So I dedicated myself over the course of a few years to finding teachers. And I traveled the United States and studied with anyone who had pranayama in the title of their workshop, which meant that I got a number of different perspectives. In other words, I studied with teachers of different lineages and was able to understand pranayama as an energy practice, and therefore structure my teaching and show people how to structure their home practice to follow the energetic patterns associated with what they were doing. And I've made pranayama my focus ever since.
Well, and I'm glad you have, because your wisdom and how you've put together, you know, the book that you wrote, the program that you've put together is very profound. And I'm glad that you are sharing that with the world. And I'm glad that I had the opportunity to study with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, all of that will always be with me. So for the audience, you know, they may not even know what pranayama is. And our audience is worldwide, mostly women. Doesn't mean men aren't part of our audience. Who knows who's exactly listening? But, you know, they don't always know it's a limb of yoga. And also what exactly it is, because even nowadays in yoga classes, that the Sanskrit term isn't always used. So would you
Yes.
share?
Uh, well, a very simple answer would be pranayama is that aspect of yoga that focuses on the breathing practices. So there are different techniques that modulate the breath in a certain way. That is, you are taught to breathe in a certain rhythm with a certain muscular action. So on the surface, those are practices that are based on how you use the breath as a breathing technique. Um, Prana means energy. That's one of the meanings. So this is essentially an energy practice. Prana and the breath are very closely connected. So when you breathe in a certain way, you also create a certain energy flow in the energy body. Yoga has defined the structure of the self in terms of koshas or bodies. The physical body is one, the energy body is another, related to acknowledgement of, recognition of, work with energy itself.
Mm.
That's actually true of asana too.
Sure.
Everything is is an energy practice in yoga, but pranayama is very specifically that.
Sure. And what made you seek out studying more and really diving into pranayama? I mean, you had mentioned that, there wasn't a lot of local teachers sharing that. What was there something deeper that, you really enjoyed the practice, and that's why you seeked out a deeper understanding?
It was really two things, Alyssa. One is that I, by that time, had, studied in depth with a number of masters and had years of daily asana practice, and realized that I didn't need one more asana training. I mean, by then, if you do that, as you know, you as you do your own practice, you begin to communicate with your inner teacher. That inner teacher is very wise, and you begin having an inner dialogue about what is occurring in any of your practices. And I, and so it was at that point, I think everyone reaches this point in their lives at different times around different issues where something is missing. I am missing something important here. And so I, started opening my eyes. What is it? Let it appear. And
Yeah.
at that time, Amy Weintraub was scheduled to teach at our yoga studio. And she is the acknowledged national expert on yoga and mood disorders. She wrote the book years ago on yoga and depression. And she used pranayama techniques to alter mood. And when I watched her in class change the energy in the room at will through breathing techniques, I said, I'm missing, this is what I'm missing. I'm definitely missing this. And so it launched me into an exploration of pranayama. And also, I had studied for years with an energy healer. Martha, and I, who started the studio together, all studied with Catherine Dufresne and practiced weekly together. And so it put together two things for me. Put together the, ancient energy techniques that were passed down through pranayama, and this my energy studies apart from yoga.
Now, you put this beautiful course together after learning so much from so many people. What was your catalyst for doing that? And what was your intention?
Well, were books and courses on pranayama, still not nearly as many as you find on asana,
Mhm.
but there wasn't the one thing that I would say about it. I felt like there was one thing missing, and or at least there were my take on it could add to the body of work that was written down. And in particular, asana had developed to a point where trainings in asana did a lot of uh, uh, demonstration of how to modify the physical poses for different people. And I did not see that in pranayama.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I also didn't see a lot about sequencing. So I was taking my asana practice, what I felt was necessary as a good asana teacher, and saying, I know how to modify pranayama techniques, and I would like to talk about how to create different sequences of pranayama techniques in order to have a different energetic experience depending on what you're looking for.
That whole sequencing of pranayama was an amazing takeaway, not only in just how you taught it, but how you encouraged us, to practice. I, I really love that, and you also encouraged us to do pranayama privates, and which I incorporate in my yoga therapy one-on-ones, and also to do classes. I haven't launched a pranayama class. It's mainly time, but it's always in the back of my head because I do enjoy pranayama so much, and I think it's so important. And a lot of that is from your training and your sharing. Also, I specifically, two things. Yesterday, I was working with a client. Well, I've been teaching more on yoga for depression, and was teaching some pranayama. And I'm looking around the room and like, everybody is not getting this. They need one-on-one. Like, where am I breathing? And some of them are my private clients, so I was able to do that. And yesterday, I was working with one client. And just, she was taught how to breathe into her belly to help with anxiety. But what often happens, and you're aware of this, is that they're taught how to just move the muscles of their belly and not really breathe with their entire torso, or what you would call the breath balloon. And so helping someone feel their rib cage expand and those sort of things. I am actually applying that. So I thank you for that encouragement, because it's so important, especially when it comes to using these practices for therapeutic reasons and to help people release those restrictions that they're holding on to. The other thing that I remember specifically from your training is our last gathering, we did a sequence. You led us through a breathing sequence that couldn't tell you exactly what it was, but it was absolutely amazing. And you could feel like everybody, you had joked before that, you want to have that nice arc so that you don't leave us completely high at the end. But you did leave us, an energetic high, not in a can't come down sort of thing. But no one knows this because there was only two of us left in the room. We were packing up to leave, and you could just feel the vibrations, the high vibrations in the studio. That one of the shelves fell down with all of the products on it. I mean, we were just having a conversation, and, class had ended. There was only two of us gathering. We were chatting because they were both from Indiana. And then all of a sudden it was like spontaneous combustion, and the shelf fell down and all the Banyan botanical products fell down. And I'm like, that was weird. That had to be because of all the energy in the room. So there is definitely some power in
Yes.
pranayama practice, and there's definitely some movement of energy there. I will totally speak to that.
It's a little, disconcerting to think you had kinetic powers, but it does feel like that. It does feel that strong.
Yes, yes, it can for sure. Um, well, I know you've worked one-on-one with a lot of people. You use these practices for mood management. You use them just to help people breathe better and deeper. And so, how do you go about? And you may not do this anymore now that you're semi-retired. But how have you in your life used these pranayama practice working with uh, private clients? And then I know you've led group classes as well.
Yes, it's surprising how many people through illness or injury have established a distorted breathing pattern in
Mm-hmm.
themselves. Sometimes you have an injury that makes it difficult to breathe or is painful to breathe and you begin breathing in a more shallow way. And then when that injury is healed, the pattern doesn't change. You don't actually come back to a healthier breathing pattern. That's true with illness or injury. So, it's surprising. I don't know of much breath training
No.
being done outside of yoga. So you can be released from the medical establishment and really still not address some of the dysfunction that remains. And as you also noted, Alyssa, you can also have restrictions in the breath because of emotional holdings. And so breath privates are really meant to one-on-one look at a client's breathing pattern and show them how to retrain their body to breathe in a healthier pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it may involve classic pranayama techniques. Some of the basic pranayama techniques just are demonstrating a healthy breath that uses the breathing muscles correctly. And some of them are much more convoluted than that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And and so you choose from the various techniques that are are available to you to give the client an experience of different ways to use the body and even different ways to strengthen, for example, the diaphragm or the intercostal muscles. Um, so that's private, therapeutic privates. In uh, open class to the public, uh, the focus for me isn't as much on uh, therapy. Um, the, that doesn't mean that there couldn't be therapeutic classes. I've taught workshops on how to have a healthy breath. Say, take 4 hours or 6 hours and walk through the whole breath mechanism and have students feel into each aspect of that. But in public classes, um, the emphasis really is more on pranayama as a spiritual practice. It's one of the 8 limbs of yoga. It is uh, every pranayama practice is a meditation on the breath, but more uh, importantly, from my point of view, because you create different vibratory states, you already alluded to being so vibrating at such a high frequency, a shelf fell off the wall. It puts you into different altered mental states. And so it's really a pathway into deep meditative states of different sorts. And when in teaching a public class for me, even though it was a drop-in class and people could be doing it for the first time, it still followed an arc that took them into high vibrational states and then brought them down to a state where they could walk out the door and drive and do the next thing in their life. But they had a meditative experience in that arc. I think that answered your question. Was that okay?
And maybe even sharing why it's so important to bring them back down so that they can drive home.
Well, yes, you can. You alluded to the fact that, you know, I don't leave someone out there on, in an altered state of consciousness. When I was looking at sequencing pranayama techniques, so that you enter a pranayama practice from the state you are in whenever you sit down to do it or lie down to do it, and then you raise the vibration, you can then be in a state where it would be in a meditative state where it'd be difficult to function in normal space-time. You're not oriented to your surroundings in a normal way. And that's really uncomfortable. A lot of people have had that experience where they're very open, every sense is open, they're exquisitely receptive, they're perceptive, but they're not making any value judgments like turn right here in the car. That could be the end point of a pranayama practice if you're just going to sit meditation after that. But create different arcs of sequences in pranayama for specific reasons and specific time frames. So if you know that you have a 1 hour class, and people are going to get up and work, go about their day, drive away from the studio, and then function in normal space-time, you need to have grounding practices at the end that reorient everyone to the fact that they're back in an eyes open everyday state of consciousness. And they still retain that the gifts and benefits of a pranayama practice, but they can go on about their day. Whereas if you are working with people, let's say you're working with people who are on retreat, they don't have to do anything. And the day that you spent a whole day in doing pranayama, and then had that intense vibration, the feeling of intense energy in the room around you, that was a day where we said we're pulling out all the stops. We're not worried about. We're going to have an experience of intense practice today. And we grounded at the end, but it was also really concentrated look at energy that day. So it depends on how much time you have and what you're going to do afterwards. And it's very important to ground before you leave the room.
Yes, I completely agree. I love the story that you shared about being a pranayama zombie at Kripalu at one point during your trainings.
Yes.
Because I just could visualize that going into the lunchroom or whatnot, or the dinner hall, and just because I've been there several times, and it is true, to bring, I felt like you did ground us, but the energy was so high, I think, just in the whole place, that the shelf fell down, which was really funny. So let's talk about. We've kind of touched on why pranayama is important, but we really haven't dived deep into it, of of why someone would want to do a pranayama practice. We've talked a little bit of therapeutic stuff, helping breathe better, release things, and then meditative, kind of getting to higher states. But why would someone, because our audience may be very new to this, really want to understand a pranayama practice, and what are all the benefits or healing benefits? Can you share that? We've kind of touched on mood management, but maybe go a little deeper into that.
Some of the pranayama practices are actually labeled as kriyas. And kriya is in Sanskrit means a detoxification or healing practice, detoxing or healing practice. Kapalabhati, the rapid breath, the skull shining breath, is a classic kriya. And yoga defines the energy body in great detail and very specifically, and that's a long topic in itself. But the kriyas are practices that sort of clear the energy channels of the body, and they're very health promoting. And all of the practices, all of the techniques in pranayama have some health benefit because they work so directly, because they're energetic practices. They work so directly on the energy body. They work very directly on our emotional responses to life. Emotions are vibrations. Everyone knows that. There's a different feeling, different energy feeling to being angry than an energy feeling to being depressed and feeling lethargic. So depressions express themselves in ways that we can feel easily as energy states. And so pranayama is, as Amy Weintraub teaches it, for example, and as we teach it, you do this yourself. It meets an energy state and changes its vibration. So it's very therapeutic in that way. And it's not all of kind of yoga medicine, Ayurveda, and our work with pranayama therapeutically, for example. All the practices are normalizing or optimizing. I just had someone say the other day that she did, I'm sorry, I can't remember which practice she was talking about, but she did a practice when she was anxious and it made her feel calm. And she did a practice when she was calm but fatigued, and it gave her energy. In other words, gave her energy and lifted her mood. Mm-hmm. And so what she was saying was, a practice doesn't do just one thing. It sort of does what I need at the time. And that's an odd idea therapeutically to us, because our medical system says, here, lower your blood pressure, this pill will do that, or raise your blood pressure, this different pill will do that. Whereas your yoga practice works differently in different people and differently in the same person at different times. It optimizes your experience, optimizes your physical health, your emotional health, your spiritual experience. So I think of it that way therapeutically. It's not cut and dried. When you're working with someone therapeutically, you're not saying to yourself something like, oh, this person has insomnia and this is good for insomnia. Because what's good for insomnia in one person isn't necessarily going to work in someone else. So you're watching their responses energetically to the practices you're doing, and then they're taking away a customized experience, an experience that's been customized for them, practicing it. You get back together and say, how is this working in you? Let's modify this if necessary. I'm not sure I'm speaking exactly to your question.
Sure you are.
So it has always been practiced, at least from the 13th century onward, from the Pradipika and the Hatha yogis onward, as a means of enhancing the vessel that we use in our spiritual life, that is the body and the mind, the body mind, and its obvious uses in everyday life is that it does that. It therapeutically, it fosters physical and mental health. Mm-hmm. But but it was really designed as a spiritual practice.
Sure.
You know, if you're reading the works of the sages, they're enhancing the health of the physical body and mental, emotional body, the bliss body, in order to be prepared to sit meditation and realize the deep truths of existence. So it's, depending on your needs at the moment, it will match your inquiry, your interests, be fulfilling in various ways.
What would you share if someone was interested, because a lot of people will do the physical asana practice, but not necessarily be exposed to a pranayama practice, or they've just, brand new to any yogic practices at all. What would be your recommendation to people who would like to learn more about how to use the breath to enhance their healing or spiritual enlightenment, however they'd like to use that, or just get into pranayama at all? What would you share for someone to start?
That's a really good question. Pranayama, because it does work so directly on the emotional body, can also create emotional disturbance. That is, too much of the stimulating practices can make you anxious, mm-hmm. for example, or keep you awake at night. It's always been a practice that it's recommended to do first with a teacher. Mm-hmm. And I honestly, Alyssa, I don't know of another way. In other words, in today's world, there may be very good videos and that kind of thing. I'm not up on that. But the best way is to find a yoga teacher who teaches pranayama and join in the practice. When I designed my course, I said, you can't learn to do pranayama in a weekend, just like you can't learn to do asana in a weekend. And so, as you know, this course spanned 9 months, mm-hmm. and we practiced together for 9 months. And it takes a while to to feel comfortable in it, know your way, know your responses to the various techniques. So if possible, you do want to find a yoga teacher and sit with them over time to develop a practice. The long teacher training that you did was comprehensive. A lot of people or in lineages start introducing people to pranayama by teaching them one sequence. And, you and I work through multiple sequences, but that's not a bad way either. If you just have one sequence, then that works for you, and you can add it to your morning routine. You always need to do pranayama on an empty stomach early, at the first thing of the day, because it can distort your sleep patterns if it's done too late in the day. So I wish there were an easy answer to that, but I think the real answer is find a yoga teacher and study with them.
And I completely agree with you, Linda. I think that's important. There are videos and things, and that's nice to kind of help remind you, because I'll record audios for some of my clients as well to remind you, or, how to do it, introduce it. But just like the instance when I had my class I talked about, and I was introducing, there's just a 3-part breath. And, and they were all struggling. And I thought, okay, we're going to do something else. That's what I did in the moment, because I didn't have a chance. There was 10 people in that class to come around everybody individually, but that's what they really needed. But there's also that when you continue to practice and come to class over and over again, like I teach a yin yoga nidra meditation class that I've taught probably for 6 years on Sunday nights. And we start with a centering and a pranayama. And I kind of, I wing it, because it depends who shows up in my class, what I'm going to teach. Because if I have a bunch of brand new people, I really simplify what we're going to do. And if I have people who've been with me for 6 years, then we might do something a little more. But it's not a whole, sequence or anything. It's just usually one technique. But the people who have been there over and over again, they've probably improved their techniques and their breathing and the whole practice in itself, because they are going on a regular basis. That would
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So any final thoughts to share, Linda? This has been a great conversation.
Oh, thank you. Only that I really do encourage people to add this to their life. As you know, Alyssa, your students are very grateful for when this door opens and they have this kind of experience and this self-inquiry. When I first started teaching pranayama in my studio, there was very little pranayama going on. And once I began teaching this long course to teachers, people like you have gone out into the world and taken this out into the world and been available then to your students. And the idea is to make a large community of people who have this practice available to them, because its benefits are boundless.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you, Linda, for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We'll make sure to link to Yoga on High, how they could, I don't know if they still offer your book if you're not part of the course, like if people can order that. Okay.
Yes.
We'll link to that and the pranayama course, because I know that's still going on in the show notes. So all of our audience can follow up, learn more. If they want to dive deeper, we'll have access to that. Well, thank you again for joining in on another amazing conversation about mind-body medicine and yoga as a therapy on the Wild Wisdom podcast. I wanted to let you know that I have decided to launch my Calm Mind Wild Body program in a live workshop version starting April 1st. So you can sign up now anytime if you go to my website, alyssafinnig.com/Calm Mind Wild Body. I'll also put links in the show notes. And make sure that if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or whatever you're listening on, that you subscribe so that you don't miss another episode. And feel free to follow me on Facebook or Instagram, and you'll be the first to hear when another episode is live as well. I'm Alyssa Finnig. See you at the same time, same place next week. Wild blessings.